So, have I missed anything these last few weeks? As the 20th of this month, January 2021, has decidedly shown us, the Trump era, for better or for worse, is over. I say this as some who are accelerationists welcome the new incoming administration and the return of the inner and outer parties working in lockstep for the sake of immanentizing the eschaton. Others, who like myself know that we're in for a very long winter. Not just the season, mind you, but the long shadow of government, now once again in complete control by those who see individuals on the right as incompatible figures and their equation of how democracy should function. Between the blatant lack of legal and political recourse from what took place on November 3rd, 2020 to now, many on the right have rightfully claimed that we have witnessed the most effective demoralization campaign against political opposition in factions here in the US and to her supporters on the right abroad. In addition to the mask slipping further to a point where it is too late to quickly put it back on, racist progressive policy and virtue signaling has reasserted itself and took the reins back in every institution publicly available to the populace. I have seen many resigned to the position of swallowing an eternal black pill. I hope to use this video essay as an opportunity to lay out an alternate vision for all of you, to put the glass of water down and to put the black pill back on the bottle. So sit back, take a deep breath, and let me give you my prudent observations. The last 5 years, if not more, have led to a great awakening on the right wing in the counter-progressive movement. Ideas proselytized in public, private, and decentralized networks across the world. Names and concepts once obscure now enter the popular discourse, even on the normie right, allowing people sympathetic to one's cause to have a starting ground. Michael Malice grows in popularity, whose streams with Curtis Yarvin are his most popular, and even Jack Posobiec of OAN is tweeting about the cathedral. This does not mean that we abandon our ideals for a broader coalition and let the masses in. No, Robert Conquest's laws of politics are still axiomatic to this day. We must continue to gatekeep, to prevent subversion, but know that we are not completely locked out of the discourse nor completely silenced. Well, for the time being, that is. This is the time that we should not let go to waste. Even in the wake of suspended accounts, deplatforming, canceling, firing, demonetization, and more, cultivated networks are beginning to form and fight back. Laying down our proverbial arms is the quickest way to surrender and defeat in the grand scheme of things. There will be alternatives. There are alternatives now for networks. Email lists, Proton Mail, Gab, BitChute, Rumble, the return of the blogosphere, Urbit, Substack, and more. There are still ways to maintain an online presence. We must condition ourselves to not be reliant on the existing platforms of Silicon Valley to do so. Failure to use the alt-tech that's in development leaves us even more vulnerable, and we cannot abandon the push for competing alternate institutions. The clampdown is coming. The talk of domestic terror laws in the US against the right is coming. The left in its current form in this culture war wants you feeling atomized and alone. I know as well as you do that they will not mourn your loss, either digitally or if you were to lose your life. But you are not alone. This means we as individuals must be willing to act, build, and serve in any way that you can. Politics and your worldview are no longer just a hobby. I've learned this lesson firsthand and well. I started this channel originally just as a fun way to express my thoughts and ideas, especially after years of being someone in my group of colleagues and friends as the go-to for perspective and a right-leaning viewpoint, as well as years of watching other creators build their platform and network with others. But after talking with other creators, meeting so many new and interesting voices, all I can say is that I understand how important community is for some of you, myself included, in fighting back against the entropy and the atomization of the modern world. My resolve to act and to be a better person has hardened, and I will do my best to share what I learn, my worldview, my lessons from readings and interactions with others, and localized engagement. You cannot assume that you can hold out in your small town, and that they'll simply pass you by. The Benedict option is not a feasible possibility. They hate you, and they will come after you. But there is so much out there for us to do. We cannot simply be anti-progressive. We must show others that we have values, ideas, and traditions worth fighting for, worth joining, and worth preserving. We must be shining examples of good people in our communities. The neat life, as it's known, the right-wing anime waifu Coomer are tropes that must die this year. We must be men and women who volunteer, go to city council and PTA meetings, to where your neighbors can see you as a natural and trustworthy leader. The little things matter. Taking care of yourself, picking up and dusting off your career, technical, and trade ambitions are a must. Building yourself up to make yourself a family. For what is the point in this cultural and political conflict if you have no one to pass it down to? We must be creators, artists, academics, craftsmen, artisans, and more. Teach your skills to the next generation. You will prevent a generation of aimless, atomized young men from radicalization or worse by simply reaching out. Men's clubs, book clubs, sports, hobbies, and gaming are all valid ways to build your tribe and to be a leader. Do not let yourself languish, or be resigned to your current station in life. By the very nature of our political identities, we all strive for that little patch of heaven, that state of life where we can look back and say that your life was a life well lived. This does not mean, however, life will be without hardship or compromise or adversity. You will have the incessant and inane racist HR seminars. Your spouse may not agree with you politically all the way. Your neighbor very well may be just an asshole. And the local tax code may violate your wallet from time to time. This does not mean that you live on with reckless abandon or pursue mindless hedonism. As the old saying goes in this culture war, all this propaganda, programming, and fear-mongering would not be necessary if they were truly winning. Our foe is gargantuan and implacable, but certainly not unbeatable. We must now all reach into ourselves our own heroic will, if we are to make spaces for ourselves, for our families, and our posterity. It may take great acts, or it may be the small, everyday things that make you a good man. These actions will help you in the long run, as new strategies and networks are formulated in the coming weeks, months, and years ahead. Now, what do some of these things look like? What am I asking of myself, my listeners, and others to do? Individuals who wish to oppose the system in its current direction must be a paragon of virtue. Now, this does set up the classic family values conservative turns out to be a closet homosexual trope of coming back up again. I am not suggesting that you abandon your vices. I know that I am not perfect in my own predilections and preferences. I used to smoke. I like to drink. I like pursuing women whose politics I cannot fucking stand. However, being cognizant of these things and working to improve yourself and your community is the first step that needs to be taken. Now, before you write in the comments that I'm about to go into some sort of Jordan Peterson-like rant about cleaning your room, I want to tell you that I'm not going to be regurgitating the 12 rules for life. Even then, I would tell you that his observations about taking care of yourself before the world is valid. I'm talking about setting an example for others who feel disaffected. If the right, either as a cultural or political force, is going to stand the test of time, and not wither in numbers, we must provide a healthy alternative to the entropic politics of the left. I am not saying we are all going to be great men and leaders effecting change on some grand scale or the narrative of history, but rather that we have the means to be good neighbors, members of our church, examples to our friends and our families. I am not telling you to just go outside. The internet has done an unspeakable damage to just about everyone, but you can provide a means to show others that there is a way to live a better life. This means finding ways to not only protect yourself from the atomizing world that is increasingly finding new ways to make you feel isolated, and a target of laws that on paper are supposed to apply equally to everyone, but clearly don't on political grounds. I say this as I find myself leaning back on the phrase, "the personal is political." The phrase originating from second-wave feminists, while used often to challenge the family unit and other aspects of gender norms, held to the point that personal experience of individuals had significant leverage in our ability to communicate about larger political movements, structures, and tradition. The personal is political, in my opinion, in the way that one conducts oneself in the private and personal square. You have only a few things that you are born with in this world: your name, your family, and your word. The upkeep of these three things allows you to maintain healthy communities, networks, and your own personal standing. We cannot advocate for traditional moral living or lifestyles in terms of husbands and wives if we are merely seen as autistic spurgs ranting online and posting obscure and obscene pepes when we see a woman's post on Twitter. Don't get me wrong, I love a good shitpost, but when there is a time and a place for it, And right now, especially with the uncertainty that lies ahead, it is important to buckle down and focus on providing the structures to exist and flourish offline as well as on the internet. So what does this mean? In the wake of the personal now being political and being targeted by the cathedral, what can we do now that Joe Biden is in office? What can we do when so many are now in control that would like to see us out of the public square? First, make sure that your online presence is done in a way that makes it almost impossible to have you doxxed. Engaging in public events like town halls, protests, and rallies should be done in a way that doesn't lead to you being photographed or exposed by the local rabble or agents of the state. Whether that's the malicious district attorney who's a political activist, or the family and neighbors who will not hesitate to report you to the police. This is already happening for many who protest on the right, having their family expose them on social media to get them fired or worse. You cannot risk loss of employment and livelihood, not in these times when the standard of living is well below that of the generation before you. Two-factor authentication for your social media. Scrub any and all social media posts that has your personal details, especially if you've posted political opinions or ideas that would constitute wrongthink in today's HR departments controlled in their environments. While it may be difficult, learn the email addresses, phone numbers by memory, so you don't have to be reliant on massive data collectors that are our current forms of social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and others in Silicon Valley. Doing so will make it harder for you to inadvertently expose yourself, your beliefs, as well as others, especially if you have family members who are die-hard progressives. This will save you a lot of time to be more productive and to focus on the work and other personal projects by not being so consumed with social media to begin with. Yes, have access to your favorite news sites, commentators, and news aggregators, but do not set yourself up for failure by making your opinions publicly known while behind enemy lines in a culture war. Second, do not fall into the trap of an echo chamber. You are not alone, but you cannot allow yourself to fall into this false sense of security that you have the numbers to back you up, either online or in person. You should be aware of the talking points in the media, what your progressive friends are saying and believing, as it will allow you to avoid the Kafka-esque traps that are rhetorically imbued when it comes to the issues of race, privilege, and wealth. You have the advantage of having a better understanding of your opposition than the opposition does of you, which gives you a chance to sidestep and provide a neutral-sounding counterpoint without necessarily revealing your own politics. It is important to be aware of all sides of an issue and to know what exactly the narrative is going to be and what will be ran against your political position. In addition to the fact that no ideology is ever 100% correct on anything, and people, reporters, and pundits do get things wrong. Being well-rounded in your sources and knowledge will help you, for the same reason why I have copies of Foucault and Deleuze next to my copies of Carlyle and Milton Friedman. Third, conduct yourself professionally in your public and private life. I do not mean that you need to be the stereotypical suit-wearing conservative that you see parodied in high school videos and TikToks, but I mean making yourself reliable. Participating in neighborhood meetings, working in local politics with city councils, school boards, and more. I have a video on local offices to run for and to consider. While the federal elections may seem dubious at this moment, being someone in the community who looks to as being reliable, hardworking, and generally has their act together will help, and having a network of individuals who can rely on you and whom you can rely on in case of an emergency. Building back high-trust communities will be essential to survive the coming dark days of the long winter ahead of us. Living the neat life or being the tendy man isn't going to get you a well-paying job or a stable home life either. You can have your vices, but do not let them become your addictions. Find a place where you can have community, whether that's a game like 40K, church, a book club, or a physical activity. Mental and physical fitness is just as important as the way you conduct yourself in your day-to-day affairs. Besides, living a long, healthy, and virtuous life is the best kind of revenge, is it not? I say these things as I do my best to improve my own life, as I will certainly try my best not to be a hypocrite as I work to improve my health, life, career, and station. But I argue in these times of uncertainty that we cannot allow ourselves to give in to the demoralization, atomization of the modern world. Regardless of where you may reside, there are still things that can be done to improve our local communities. Is that not what we should be, rather than just being the ones who oppose the current imposing order, but to provide healthy, meaningful alternatives? whether that be in our faith, our friends and family, as well as our professions. To seek that life is at its end, to be said just by ourselves but by our friends and neighbors, as a person who lived the best life possible. The personal is political, and our personal values, conduct, morals, and ethics are going to be the bedrock of any future political movement. Whether you're someone whose politics align closely with my own, or came across this just to vehemently disagree, personal conduct and values are applicable to all. Do not be discouraged. Do not lose sight of the important things right in front of you. Have people that you can talk to online and offline. Do not fall prey to the dopamine buttons of fresh hot takes on Twitter, e-celebs, and other vices to distract you from what's right in front of you. There are still ways to live a good life and to make things better in this world. Do not be discouraged, and do not fall victim into staring into the abyss. It will stare back, and it is a very hard stare to break from. Now, there are those out there that may ask why. Why do I offer this relatively optimist call to action, a rudimentary outline for the personal being political and our personal conduct to change? Lately, I have found myself looking back on the story of the American naval commander John Paul Jones and his command of the USS Bonhomme Richard, which of course is where the title of the video comes from, derived from his famous quote, but apocryphal, quote, "I have not yet begun to fight," end quote, in his battle against the British commander Pearson of the HMS Serapis. As the popular American folk song details of the battle, quote, "If you cannot do better, boys, then sink alongside," end quote. I'm inspired to act and to offer this counter. I've noticed many in right-wing circles that there is a unique cultural appeal of famous last stands, both in history and in the media. The Spartans at Thermopylae, the Battle of Rorke's Drift popularized in the film Zulu, Chamberlain's charge at the Battle of Little Round Top. For even if I lose, is there not something more intrinsically honorable about a last stand, for a cause deemed all but lost? In fact, I would argue that that may be a potential route for bringing people over to the right in the future, that there is honor and an appeal in being in a position of being outgunned, outmanned, and outmaneuvered institutionally. Relief may be on its way, but we don't know when or if it'll get here in time. Are you willing to hold out just a little longer still? To hold in and dig your feet into the dirt, knowing that we just might win, or at very the least, buy our future a little more time? Many on the right must come to realize that this is a multi-generational conflict, a political struggle whose fruits that we may not likely see in our lifetimes. Regardless of age or status, we are all now the first generation to take stock and to load, swinging round to dig in, fortify, and to fight back effectively and not just nominally. Remember, the Reconquista took nearly 800 years. I pray it doesn't take us that long, but if the world can be just slightly improved for even my grandchildren to enjoy, then I know all of my efforts will have been worthwhile. And even then, it wouldn't have been enough. But I have hoped then that I have passed down what I know and the knowledge of those before me down to the next generation, as we must all do. I still believe even now that we continue that this is a two-front conflict. One of developing parallel competing institutions and decentralized networks to promote our cause and to pass on our knowledge, which will make it harder for the cathedral to clamp down on. The other being the existing culture war, fighting in the existing institutions and trenches. As I've said before, you cannot have one without the other, and as one front buys time and ground for the other. I have a video on these positions of influence, which I will link in the description below. As the Trump era comes to a close, the politics and practice of retribution comes for all of us. But no, I will not stand here like the right of olden days, of principled defeatism and driving the speed limit, who will not fight back in self-defense while pearl-clutching their so-called principles. I will debate, I will write, talk with others, and organize where I can. I hope that you will join me, as I hope to join you on our own political and spiritual journeys. There are things that we can do now to improve our status and station, as I've discussed in today's commentary. So as we seek to improve ourselves, build for our security and posterity, know that the road ahead is daunting and fraught with substantial risks to our well-being. Know that you aren't alone, and do not let yourself be atomized or demoralized. Network, act, and improve oneself for the long winter ahead. We may not sink alongside, but to ensure a victory in ways that we can. For the only prudent thing that I can think of is to stand firm to our principles and return fire, for soon one day we may be able to humble the cathedral's pride. Thanks for listening. Be prudent, everybody.